the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, giving you weekly sports analysis, opinions, and discussion. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and J-Raff.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 160th episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mays, alongside of me, co-host J-Raff.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Plenty to talk about. With the football games that have taken place since our last show, and it's kind of interesting how, and this is just kind of a testament to the NFL and its power and relevance would be the fewer number of games, and yet there's still a lot to talk about. And certainly some of the things that we've seen this weekend, you're going to hear a lot about probably until next weekend's games. So
my guess is probably up until the first week of next year's season.
Oh yeah,
because when it involves the Dallas Cowboys, a week after another event involving the Dallas Cowboys, this is just the ingredients for an incredible amount of talk and speculation and possibly rule changes as a result. So we'll see what happens with all of that, and we'll get into it if you're not sure what we're talking about, or if you know what we're talking about and are excited to hear what we have to say about it. But we're going to be focusing on, again, football this evening, just like we have for the past, 6 months?
Yeah.
No, we have the... First up, we'll talk yesterday's game, so we'll talk about Baltimore, New England, and what is kind of the storyline from that. Also involves refs and legality and plays and formation, and we'll dive into that one, which I think that one's a lot more cut and dry. I don't really get all the hullabaloo about it. I think that one's simple. Then we'll touch a little bit on Carolina-Seattle. I think there's too much to say about that game. I think it ended up as we expected it to. And then we'll definitely spend time on Dallas-Green Bay. And unfortunately, the Denver-Indy game is going on right now, so we won't be able to touch on that when it's concluded. But we'll give you updates throughout. And unfortunately, we're once again not broadcasting video to Ustream for whatever reason. So hopefully people have gotten my message to switch over to the Blog Talk Radio stream. You can hear us there. And we will have the full video episode up on YouTube. I'll post that immediately after the show is over. So if you'd like to watch the show, you can hold off about an hour, and we'll have that up for you then as well. So, but before we do that, I don't think we did it last week. But for those of you that may be listening through Blog Talk Radio, we're going to give you the contact information so that you can make this show a little more interesting. I think if we were broadcasting appropriately, we might have had a call or two tonight. I don't know if anyone switched over to Blog Talk Radio, but if you did, Justin has our contact info for you.
Yeah, we'd love to have you call into the show using the Mays Sandwich Shop hotline. You can do that and reach us at the number 530-563-6297. Again, 530-563-6297. You can also email the show using the Mays Sandwich Shop inbox at joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. Again, joemaysandjraff@gmail.com. You can also reach us on social media through a couple different places. We have things like on Facebook. You can like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. We follow those during the show and throughout the week. And like we mentioned, the phone number and email are also good. So, that's how you can get in touch with us during the week, or actually during the show. And we'd love to have your take. Again, we know there are lots of hot takes on some of the events of the games, including some of the ones yesterday and actually today's. But we'll get to today's games later. Why don't we start with yesterday's game? Do you want to talk the late game first?
Yeah, let's talk Carolina-Seattle, because I think that was the pretty much straightforward. I don't think there's anything too significant. Right. I don't think there was too much. At halftime, it was close.
A friend of mine, I think the spread at one point this week was like 11.5 points, and a friend of mine was asking me what I thought of that, because he thought he thought Seattle would win, but 11.5 is a lot, and I agreed. 11.5 is a lot in an NFL game. However, I kind of equated it to, I thought it was going to be a lot like the Oregon-Florida State college game.
Yeah.
In that, yes, it's close. A close game in the third quarter. And I don't exactly remember the scoring sequences of the game last night, but, I know the Florida State game was close at one point in the third quarter, and then all of a sudden, a couple things, unravel, and the team just falls apart. And I wouldn't say that the Panthers fell apart like Florida State did, but I think it was a one possession game. And then next thing you know, they were up 31-10 or something like that, Seattle. So and Carolina is not going to come back in that. They're not built for that at all.
Not at all.
One thing I did take away from the game, and I feel like this almost every time I watch the Panthers play a game, there are moments in a game and some throws that Cam Newton makes where I'm like, oh my gosh, he is so good. And then there are plays where I see him and I'm like,
what is he doing?
Okay, that's below average. And I don't know if that's I don't know what causes that. You would hope to see more of those. Oh my gosh, he's so good at this point. He's been in the
being
league
a number one overall pick,
right? And you understand it was going to take some time, especially the offensive system he came from, all that stuff. But man, there are definitely things that you see where you look like, okay, that's why he was a number one pick. Some of the throws he makes are just unreal. But some of the decisions and things that he makes, and I don't know if that's part of just a lack of an offensive mindset in Carolina. I don't think that's helped him at all. I don't know that that's really held him back at all. Like I don't know. I heard some people saying last night, what could Cam Newton, not Cam Newton necessarily, but like someone with that skill set that had like been drafted into like a Chip Kelly offense, like what would that look like? You get those what ifs all the time though in
how many people's careers could be rewritten if they landed in a different era or with a different
people talk about that with the Colts all the time. The Colts potentially, and Andrew Luck, I know he's still working on it. He still hasn't reached. A lot of people think he hasn't reached that full potential yet and all that stuff. But the Colts could have ended up with two once in a generation quarterbacks in like a 15-year time frame.
Life is not fair.
Right. On the other hand, Cleveland has had like 25 quarterbacks since they got a team back, and they've all been terrible.
99 or whatever that was, 16 year, about the same time period between Manning to Luck.
Yeah.
They essentially, I know there was a year that they used multiple quarterbacks when Manning was injured, but the Colts essentially had two quarterbacks, but the Browns had 25.
On the flip side of that, man, Russell Wilson is good. I still don't know what the thing is going to happen.
People wrong,
and
including me.
Did you see the report that came out at like 6:30 yesterday, like right before you're getting to game time? There are reports that Seattle this offseason, because he's still on his rookie contract making $600,000 this year, that he is going to be the highest paid quarterback.
Yeah, I did see
in this offseason. Now, that being said, I don't know how this playoffs will end out.
If it ends as him as back-to-back Super Bowl champ?
Even if he makes it to the Super Bowl, if you make back-to-back Super Bowls and he won one of them, and now, I understand there's more to it. I understand that, but you want to talk about something that, in a way, almost might hurt the new collective bargaining agreement. Everybody talked about how, it's so friendly to the teams because they can't renegotiate rookie contracts until,
they're
if they could have locked them up a little sooner, they probably could have gotten a huge discount.
You're right. But that's there's always good sides, bad sides, everything.
Right.
And nothing is a win-win.
And actually, I was going to say, that almost shows that it's a great system, because when a guy has played so well, yes, he didn't get I say a lot of money. He was making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and endorsements.
It's got to compartmentalize. You got to focus just on sports or in the NFL. Can't talk about us sitting here talking about how we wouldn't mind making $600,000 a year. I'm sure.
But when you look at what he's making versus other quarterbacks who are much worse, and what he just continues to be able to do, and again, what impressed me last night were some of the throws he made from the pocket. It was just an interesting. It was interesting to see how that actually worked out. But again, like we said, the Panthers they hung with them for a little bit, but they just didn't have what it takes. They looked like the team that won a division where no one was over 500. That's what they looked like yesterday. I'll be honest though, looking at that game at one point, I'm like, how did the Eagles crush the Panthers? And really, they didn't get crushed by the Seahawks, but they got dominated by the Seahawks. Because in that game, now I know that was a month ago, so that a lot of things change. But Seattle is going to host, the NFC Championship game next weekend, and that should be a good game. And it'll be interesting to see if Seattle can keep this going, because they seem to have really hit their stride here on offense and on defense. Marshawn Lynch again last night, just bowling over people. It's unreal how he just bowls over people and then keeps going.
Now, I think if it would work out the way that the season ends just like it did last year with the Seahawks Super Bowl victory, I think obviously Seahawks fans would be ecstatic about this, but you have to understand that I don't think they can keep it going at this pace because you're going to have to lock up Russell Wilson like you mentioned. But Marshawn Lynch, there was reports this year already that he was done there, So that's going to come to an end soon. Then you also have that dynamic defense that they have. You're not going to be able to keep all those guys. I mean, just look at Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman. I think they did an extension with one or two of those guys already, but it's going to come to a point. I'm not saying next year. They might be very good, back-to-back defending, favored to win a third, which that's never happened. No one's ever won 3 straight Super Bowls.
No.
People have made it to 3 straight, but they've never had a team win 3 straight. And if they continue their performance and are able to beat the Packers next week, make back-to-back Super Bowls, a lot of these guys, when you have success, you have players that and coaches get, self-inflated and overvalued, so you get priced out of keeping those guys. And basically, they have to become Patriots West in order to keep it going.
When you're
no other team can do it like
when you're an average player on a great team, a lot of people think you're pretty good.
Yeah.
When you're an average player on a bad team, sometimes you look really good,
bad.
or sometimes you look really bad.
Yeah, you could stand out, but then you leave and go to another
exactly.
team.
It can be, your team can have an effect on the perception of you as a player. And the great teams have been able to sort that out. The Patriots have been able to get rid of guys and keep guys for the most part. Now, there's been some of that, they haven't won, they haven't won at all. Yes, but overall, it's hard to argue with many of the decisions they made. Even the Wes Welker one. I know the first year it looked like a problem, but since then,
whatever.
I know they could have used him, but he's not that player in Denver either. No. They could use the old Wes Welker. Well, you know what?
Everyone could.
Yeah.
And I don't, people shouldn't think that I favor New England in any way, because that I do not like the Patriots. But if you can separate your emotions out of it, you want your team to operate like New England.
Yeah.
There's no other team I know Steelers fans will point out how successful Pittsburgh has been. Yeah. Green Bay fans will point out how successful Green Bay has been.
Yeah,
but none of them do them as consistently as New England
does. The 1 year they didn't make the playoffs since we've been in high school. They won 10 games or 11 games.
They were 11 and 5
11 games
with a backup quarterback.
Right. It's just ridiculous.
Right. So that's what we have to look at for the Seahawks in the future. If they can win against Green Bay next week at home, which I'm sure they're going to be favored, defending Super Bowl champs at home, number 1 seed, all the home field advantage that is the 12th man in Seattle against a Green Bay team that's really, really strong at home, but struggles a bit on the road. Yeah. And Rodgers is still beat up.
And has lost there already this year in week 1.
So it'll be an interesting NFC title game. 2nd straight for the Seahawks. I believe 4th straight for the Patriots, who yesterday were able to come back from down 14-0, not once, or down 14 points, not once, but twice. They were down 14-0.
To be down 14-0 twice would be insane.
Was it 14-0 and 28-14?
Yes.
Okay, I couldn't remember if it was 35-21, but there was 2 14-point deficits. The Patriots clawed back, tied it, took the lead, ended up winning, and they just kind of did that. I don't want to say, I guess I'll say in spite of Brady, it wasn't his best performance.
Right.
Because you mentioned that there seemed to be some throws that you were kind of like, huh.
And not like any other quarterback, you're like, oh, it looked like a good to average day. With Brady though, don't get me wrong, he put him in a position to win, and he played better than average. I'm not trying to say that he didn't. He didn't have one of those Brady.
He wasn't as crisp as we're used to.
Things. Right, there were some throws that weren't close, and not like throwaways. I mean, like somewhere you're like, where was that going? It was just interesting in that regard. However, the Patriots, and Belichick just did his thing, and they managed to get into it a couple times. A couple key points. I know there were some whining after the game by the Ravens and things like that.
Oh, we're gonna get into that.
But first of all, and this would be my response to that actually, but I'll go ahead and mention them before that anyway. They had an opportunity when they were up 14-0. They had the they had the Patriots in 3rd and long, 3rd and 9 actually, and gave up first down. It would have been another 3 and out for the Patriots. They would have gotten the ball again. So if they get the ball there and they can go down and even get a field goal and go up 17-0, now you're starting to build onto that lead and you're starting to force the hand of the Patriots a little bit. They didn't get it done. They were kind of working their way down, and we're going to have plenty of time and a shot at, the end zone, or kind of work their way down. And Flacco, who had a great game overall, threw that inexplicable pass. Now, he got fooled by the coverage. I think he thought the safety was helping.
You're talking the end of the game?
Yes, not the Hail Mary, but
essentially ended the game.
And the safety, but he lofted it so high the safety was able to get all the way over. Like, I don't really know where he was going. Torrey Smith needs to make a better play on that. I understand, like, he was running full speed, but you've got to realize, if I let him intercept it, the season is essentially over.
Right.
If you take pass interference, you knock the ball out. Like, he didn't really make. It's not like he stood there and gave up on it. I don't want to make it sound like that, but I think at that point it's kind of an all-out, like, I'm doing whatever it takes. You're not intercepting this ball, and it didn't look like that either. There were a couple other points. They were running the ball like crazy, and then they would just start passing it. Like, they were getting like 5, 6, 7 yards a chunk at them. Right. Now, at times, so I don't want to bash Gary Kubiak for that, though, because there were times where his play calling was brilliant, and you were just like, oh my gosh, he's a step ahead of Belichick, which is, well, and I know Belichick's not necessarily calling the defensive plays. I forget his first name, but Patricia is his last name, defensive coordinator. But the Ravens played good enough to win a lot of games, but there were key points where you're like, oh, when you're playing the Patriots in the playoffs, that's not going to get it done. Including, and I was sitting with the Ravens fan, my mom, at this point, they had 1st and goal at the 9-yard line when it was 28-28, and they ended up having to kick a field goal. And I said to my mom, I said,
4 points you needed right there.
You need touchdowns against the Patriots in the playoffs. Now, if it would have been like a 45-yard field goal, okay, you didn't get that close. That's a field goal. You'll take the field goal.
You're at the 9.
I said, and I'm not even talking red zone here. I'm talking inside the 10. You had 1st and goal, and you didn't get a touchdown. And here's the Gary Kubiak part that drives me nuts. They ran at least 2 of the plays were the exact same plays they ran in a goal-to-go situation earlier, and they were defended much better this time. Like, there was no creativity in the play calling there, none. They ran the play that I'm trying to think. Revis got called for the holding on the first time, where Steve Smith cut out and then went to the post, and then they threw the one where everybody runs around like they don't know what's going on, and then you throw it into triple coverage to Owen Daniels. First time he caught it for a touchdown. Both those ended up leading to touchdowns the first time. The second time, they were defended. And why don't you run the ball there at least one of those plays? Like, legitimately run the ball. I didn't get that.
Do you think your mom is listening right now?
She might be. They were working on some wedding stuff
I didn't know
with
with the video issues if they would.
They listened last week. Last week they switched over to Blog Talk right away,
okay,
so they might be listening.
Then I just want to say I'm the messenger here. This is not me, but I'm going to read it because I like show interactivity.
That's all right. On behalf of her, I'm sure I'll give it back later in the show.
So this is it. The text is from my dad, but it is not from him. So there's actually 2 messengers here.
Okay. Oh, jeez.
My Uncle Rich.
Like whisper down the lane.
My Uncle Rich texted or talked to my dad, who is relaying to me, and he'd like me to address or direct this to your mom. He says to tell your mom to wash her socks and put them away till next year.
Yeah. My mom has good luck socks for the Ravens that she got. Actually, as a gift from Steelers fans, the year the Ravens ended up winning the Super Bowl.
Oh, well, I guess they were lucky socks then.
Now, haven't brought her quite as much luck since then, but...
Got that one. Anyone that has a Super Bowl championship in their pocket as a fan does not get to complain to us.
Agreed. Now, again, I know we're going to transition here into, some of the blame game, so to say, or the wine game afterwards.
I do want to get to that.
Now, that being said, the things we talked about right there, those would be my response to that wine game, or at least some of it. listen, you had your opportunities.
You had your chances.
To win playoff games, let alone playoff games in Foxborough, you need to play great. If anyone knows that, the Ravens need to know that. They've done it. And those games that they've won up there, they played great. They played maybe the best games that I've seen them play. Like the Ravens, in like over years, were the games they won, up in New England a couple times. And they played really well. They played better than they did most of the season. Mm-hmm. But they didn't play well enough to win. When you're going against Tom Brady and the Patriots in Foxborough, you know you're going to get runs. You know they're going to get it. You know they're going to make a run at you. You know it's going to be close, and you know you need touchdowns when you're inside the 10.
Yeah, it was a very exciting game as a fan of football, but a fan of neither the Patriots nor the Ravens. They're two of the teams, probably the two teams in the AFC, coupled maybe with the Jets, that I hate the most. It's still entertaining to watch because you respect what's happening on the field. You're not always going to have a Brady and Belichick around and this Patriots team that they've had on the field now for over a decade. And the Ravens under Harbaugh have just been, they tend to play their best football when it really, really matters.
Right.
If they get to the playoffs, they're a dangerous team. And the same can be said for his quarterback, Flacco. Neither of us are huge fans, but up until maybe the fourth quarter last night, he was on an incredible roll. He had thrown 17 touchdowns, no interceptions. He had a rating, I think, of 121.
At one point, he had four touchdowns and no interceptions last night, I think.
Yeah, he did. No, you're right. He
ended with 4 touchdowns and two interceptions.
Right. But, as I'm watching the game, and again, I don't want to defend the Patriots ever, and I'm not really defending them here. I'm more attacking, the Ravens. I'll call it whining, but it was kind of almost like that they didn't understand the rules, I thought it was a basic thing that I literally teach this to our middle schoolers, my 7th and 8th graders.
Just the one thing I had heard, because I didn't pay attention to any of the post-game stuff yesterday from that game. I was doing something else. So I didn't really know about it until we were talking about it. I did hear this morning that and I since have heard more about this, but if the Ravens were complaining about once somebody announces that they're eligible or ineligible like that, you're supposed to have a chance to respond with packages like subbing in and out.
Okay.
And the Ravens didn't think they were getting it. Now,
that makes a lot more sense than what I was hearing first.
Now, in all fairness, that was what I heard this morning. So the Ravens may have, it could have been all right, how can we word this to make it sound more coherent and
that
logical?
We knew what we were doing.
Right. My first thing I thought when was maybe Harbaugh didn't know. And that's unexcusable. Maybe his players didn't know. That's inexcusable.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe, and this is what I thought. Maybe he knew his players didn't know, and instead of being like, "Yeah, they didn't know," he made a scene out of it. I don't know. Now, either way, it's inexcusable. And if as a coach, you know when your players are out there and don't have a clue what's going on. You can see it before a play takes place. You can just tell. Call a timeout. Call a timeout.
Right. Exactly. You had it.
Right. Call a timeout. And you had other chances to stop them too. But
what bothers me about it, now, if that is the case where they thought they weren't allowed the appropriate amount of time to react,
and I do not know if they were or weren't.
That changes the perception that I have of this a lot because then that again we're going back on the refs, more ref blaming. Right. That's weak to me.
Right.
Really, that's weak. But anyways, that changes it a little bit. It's inexcusable to not know who's eligible and not eligible at this level. Like I said, I teach that to 7th and 8th graders every single year, eligibility. And now maybe casual fans don't understand, and maybe that's why this is more of a commotion because some people are like, how is that guy eligible, this guy not?
Right. And that's where I think we get into this, and it shocks us every time, but it happens all the time. Where we're in a situation how could the player not know that? Or how could the coach not know that? More the player than the coach.
Generally, yeah.
But, how could they not know that? Where you and I and many other sports fans, know a specific rule or know what is supposed to happen in a specific instance, and the player doesn't. That shocks me.
Overtime from Donovan McNabb.
That actually came to my mind. Also, just a quote, and we'll get to this, Des Bryant saying he's never seen anything like that. I have. It's called a rule. People refer to it as the Calvin Johnson rule. But we'll get to that
shortly.
But when we get to things we've seen, and maybe it's just that we remember more of those things. We pay more attention to some of those things. Maybe it's that we stress out about some of those things more than the players do. But I put it on, and like I think there was some confusion too because at first I thought that's what they were blaming the option like pass on. No, it was a 14-yard. Now it was a third down where they got a first down. But like, listen, if that's happening, call a timeout. Call a timeout.
Yeah.
We see it all the time where coaches are confused about the formation. We saw it a lot this weekend where it looked like basketball game where they were letting the offense set up and then the defense was calling timeout to match up better. Like, it happens all the time. If you know you're not matched up well, or even as the coach, even if your players know what's going on, but you're unsure, call timeout.
Right.
Call a timeout.
Yeah.
And also, just to be clear, I'm not saying that the refs didn't give the Ravens a chance to respond. I don't know. I don't know. And I think the NFL clarified saying like that it was what they did was legal.
The refs did what they're supposed to according to the NFL.
And from what I heard, and this was through Peter King this morning, was saying he was in the stadium, so he didn't get to watch the replay of what exactly was being issued till later. But he said he knows the refs announced ineligible or eligible, and he thinks what might have been a confusing is that 34 reported as ineligible, not eligible. Now, and he said
that's rare.
Right, it's rare, but legal.
Right,
and
exactly
within the rules. And he said he doesn't know if the Ravens thought they heard eligible, which would also be weird because he's 34. He doesn't have to report as eligible.
No, exactly. That's the crux of the argument.
He said he has no idea because on the TV he was watching the replay on the NFL Network. He's like you couldn't really hear the mic because it's loud in the stadium, all that stuff. So he didn't know how much time went, but like in the stadium he knows they announced something. He couldn't really hear it, but like it's just
and a lot of the Ravens fans or people defending the Ravens, want to call them, well, that's deception. That's deception. Part of the NFL is deception.
Right.
There's a ton of stuff that's deception.
If he didn't report and they were like, oh yeah, he should have reported.
Right.
Oh, now you have a big issue.
Yeah.
Now you have a gripe.
But they went through it.
And they did it. They did it kind of by the book.
34 is ineligible on this play.
And here, I'll take my shot at the Patriots here. Where the Patriots have done a lot of things and asked for forgiveness later rather than permission.
They did it
here. They did it
way.
the other way. They did it by the book what they're supposed to do. Now, just because you didn't know that,
that's not our problem.
And I hate to give Tom Brady credit here, but the Ravens, you had to know the playbook or the rule book. And if you didn't know it, call timeout and get it situated. You could clarify with the ref. Right? And the way to clarify with the ref is not running to like the 10-yard line screaming at him and get a 15-yard penalty.
I think the NFL is maybe trying to do themselves a favor so that this comes up, they have themselves covered, say, hey, our refs announced it. This guy's ineligible. To me, they don't have to do that. Because guess what? In football, you have to have 7 guys on the line. Right. You may have more than 7.
Right.
You can have 10 on the line. Right. You want to put 10 on the line, fine. It means the quarterback's back, that's it. You have 10 on the line. The only ones eligible to catch a pass are the last 2 on each side. Why? Because when everyone will be on the line, and obviously this doesn't happen, but this is just the easiest way I think I can do it without having any video to support it. If you put 10 guys on the line and just have the quarterback under center or in shotgun, doesn't matter. The last guy on the left, last guy on the right are eligible. No one else inside is.
Everyone
even
else
if they're receivers.
And you hear this all the time in the illegal receiver.
They're covered.
They're covered up. Right.
They're covered up. If you are covered up, you are not eligible. So people say, what about the slot? What about the slot is off the ball.
Right.
That's why they're an eligible receiver. When you're in a simple
and that's why when you see
formation,
somebody run in motion to the one side,
they
and
had to be in the
points
slot
to the ref that he moves up, and the other guy points that he's back and he takes a step back.
And they can't start moving until they're both situated, then they go. So if you're in a twins formation with 2 receivers to each side, the outside guy generally is on the ball, the inside guy is off, so that's where the motion happens. Now they can switch, the inside guy can be on, the outside guy can be off, it doesn't matter. No one's covered there. Right. There's one guy on the ball on each side of the line. Now if you'd put both receivers up on one side, now the inside guy, the guy closest to the lineman, closer to the quarterback, not the sideline, is now ineligible.
Right. A lot of times you won't necessarily see that with a wide receiver. He may forget to move up, but you'll get it mixed up. The tight end doesn't step back. Right. Sometimes you'll see that tight end not on the line steps back. Well, you're changing a couple things there.
So when I didn't get to see that play live. I was in and out of the game yesterday. I tuned in near the end after that had already happened, and then after the game it came up again. I'm looking at it. I was like, I can tell right away that guy. I didn't know it was rain. I was like, he's ineligible. Why? Because he's covered.
Right.
There was a guy covering him. I'm like, what is he doing?
Right.
That is common football knowledge. I mean, to me, the NFL doesn't have to have the refs say he's ineligible. He's ineligible on the basic football principles.
Right. And It's one of those things where...
And maybe what's throwing in another issue is on the backside, they had the receiver off the ball, and the guy who was lined up at tackle, which is just really a name for a position. The second guy past the center, okay, is the tackle. But he was an eligible receiver because he was not covered. The outside receiver was off the ball. He didn't have to report as eligible, even though he's playing tackle, because his number was 47.
Right. If it doesn't tip your hand that you're putting in a fullback, Patriots kind of use that halfback.
He was the H-back.
Like, because they have the kid from Boyertown, too, who's kind of like that similar position. I forget his last name. But, like, when a guy who doesn't have a number in the 60s or 70s and is on the line.
If they're wearing 1 to 49 right. or 80 to 89, you better say, I probably should cover him, unless he's covered on the other side like Vereen was. Then you know he cannot catch the ball.
Right.
We don't have to cover him. Oh, he's playing tackle, not covered, but an eligible number?
I have to give it to Bill Belichick, because he probably thought that up years ago and has been sitting on that a long time.
Well, think about
there it is.
The double pass. They said they've been practicing that for how many years?
Right. And what's his name? The guy who threw it, it was
Edelman.
Was a quarterback
at Akron, I think.
Right, yeah. So, like, it's just it's funny to think how long some of these things have been in the works.
Well, I think Brady said they did that play before. You would have to have watched film from like 13 years ago, because they ran in like 02 or 03.
Right.
It was David Patton to Troy Brown, or vice versa.
Hey, and there you go. Like, the only guy who's still left is Brady.
Yeah, right. How many of those guys have played with him?
Right.
Nobody.
So, give it credit to Belichick. He did what he was supposed to. Like, he did a great job coaching. The players
that
did
entire
it.
Coaching
and that's
staff,
another thing.
like,
when you do stuff that the players aren't normal or expected to do or aren't used to doing, if it's not practiced and rehearsed to perfection, they're going to screw it up.
Generally,
and, someone will forget the report, or not report, or somebody will not be on the line when they should be. Like, there's a lot of things in trick plays that can go wrong, and that's why generally they don't work, because a lot can go wrong, and that's why you don't run them all the time.
Generally, teams use this kind of trickeration. Usually, teams that use it are bad teams, because they don't have anything else. Because you need something to
equalize your deficiency in skills.
And that's what Miami did with the Wildcat almost 10 years ago now, or 8 years ago, however long ago that was.
We have a couple of good running backs and
we have Ronnie Brown, and he shredded the Patriots for like 4 touchdowns. It worked that year, and then other teams tried to do it, but everyone knew how to stop it then. Right. Now
I guarantee, well, I shouldn't guarantee you. I would go out on a limb and say that the teams whatever team ends up playing them next week, the Colts were up.
Pretty sure they're going to know how to stop it.
Are gonna have an understanding of how to do that. Last I saw was 21-10.
Yeah, I'll pull that up quickly.
But anyway, the Patriots did win. They will host the AFC Championship game. In just a second, we'll get you that score.
Right, when we came down to start the show, the Colts were up, I think, by 4.
Right, and I checked. It was 21-10 last I saw. Colts were up. The Broncos didn't score on the opening drive of the second half. The Colts got the ball and went down and did score. So, let's just look here.
It is 21-10. The fourth quarter is just starting.
Man, that'll be interesting. I know Manning's stats aren't that great. It was interesting play calls in the first half. They were chucking it deep a lot. And by deep, I don't mean like 15, 20. I mean like 30, 40 yards down the field. And they just missed on like a few of them. But Demaryius Thomas has like 3 or 4 legitimate drops. Not like, diving catch. No, like screen pass, hits him in the hands, goes through his hands, hits him in the chest, he drops it. He had like 2 or 3 of those, let alone drops overall. It was getting bad.
I saw this brought up today. If the Broncos lose, does Fox and his staff get fired?
I don't think so. Well, first of all, I think Del Rio's going to probably take a job somewhere else anyway. Which would solve your defensive coordinator issue. Well, which was supposed to be better. And I'll tell you what, watching the first half, Aqib Talib and Ward and some of those guys were just getting picked apart by Andrew Luck. Now, Andrew Luck was playing really well. But
a lot better than a month ago in Dallas, huh?
What frustrates me, and again, this is my fan bias coming through, was I'm not sure either one of these teams can beat the Patriots next week. But when I was watching it early on, I was like, well, if anyone could beat them, it actually might be the Colts, not the Broncos. And that kills me because I want the Broncos to win. I have nothing against the Colts. I'd root for them next week, but I just don't see it I don't know. And looking at it, I'm like, well, maybe the Colts could give them a game. They were playing really well. Their receivers their defensive backs were playing like Seattle's do. 2 yards off, you're gonna stay on you right away, and they're gonna hope the pass rush gets there. And it's just kind of it's interesting to watch that as opposed to the off 10 yards, let you just pass it and catch like the Ravens played yesterday.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. They're down by 11 in the fourth quarter at home. Last year they made the Super Bowl but got destroyed.
Right.
2 years ago, they lost to the Ravens. This year now they could potentially lose to the Colts. They're supposed to be, I don't want to, not this dream team, but they're supposed to be the odds-on favorite the last 3 years.
Here's the thing, do you think they go to, Peyton as well? When I say they, I mean John Elway. Do you think he goes to Peyton and is like, listen, are you going to give this one more year?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is Manning coming back?
If you do, then you bring back the coaching staff.
Yeah,
one more year.
You wouldn't go through.
If Manning's done, then you clean house.
Maybe clean house, start over.
Right. But I think Manning's coming back for one more year. And with that, I think
Fox and whoever doesn't choose to leave for another job
gets one more year.
I think I agree with you. I think next year. I think next year's it no matter what. If the Broncos falter, they're gonna clean house. Manning's probably gonna retire. Maybe they'll ride out, like Elway did, and that'll Manning will retire. Maybe Fox will retire. You could have an entire new slate after a good ending.
Right.
We'll find out with that. But yeah, fourth quarter of the AFC Divisional game. The winner gets to go to New England and play the Patriots next weekend. Last bit, we know we're running short on time. We've got about 5 minutes here. But we need to talk about the Cowboys-Packers game. Now, we all remember last week, everyone was up in arms about how they think the Cowboys got away with it. And somehow it means that the NFL has some conspiracy that they need the Cowboys. See, what's ridiculous about that is, or the NFL is just genius when it comes to that, because for them to make the Cowboys irrelevant for 20 years and then all of a sudden be like, we need them, it's just pure gold because no one would ever be able to figure it out.
Exactly. They had it planned to perfection.
Yeah. The NFL conspiracy is ludicrous. There's bad calls all the time in every single game. That's more of the problem. The only reason this was an issue was because it was Dallas. If it was any other team, you would have heard about it for a day and that would have been it. It wouldn't have carried over into next week. It wouldn't have mattered. But because it was Dallas, it carried over into this week, and we had the same kind of thing happen in this game.
Except they got it right this week. They got it right this week.
By the rule book, they did get it right. You're absolutely correct. If you didn't know, the Cows are driving with 5 minutes or so left in the fourth, down 5. On 4th and 2, Romo tossed up to Dez Bryant, who made a ridiculous catch.
Great catch.
And was either down at the 1 or may have even scored. Now, You say he was touched. It looked like.
He was touched when they went up for the ball. Now, I don't know. I don't know what it would have been because he did bobble. Yeah, he could have been ruled down at the 1, but it wouldn't have surprised me if it was a touchdown because of that bobble, which ends up being bigger than a bobble.
What we're trying to say is it was a catch everywhere.
It's either first and goal or a touchdown.
It was a catch everywhere, but in the NFL.
Right,
Like if that's in the schoolyard, that's probably a touchdown.
Right,
exactly. You're playing flag football with someone, that's a touchdown.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe in the reality, they would have been down at the 1. That's fine. It's still a catch.
Right. Oh,
but
absolutely.
They got it right because that's what the rule says.
Right. And one of the key things here is I keep hearing people say he had 3 feet down, and Mike Pereira, which a lot of times Mike Pereira and his explanations drive me insane. Now he's got it right by the rule book. Like he knows the rule book better than I do.
Dino said this exact same thing.
Steps don't matter in this scenario. Steps matter when you're getting possession and trying to get your feet in bounds before you leave bounds. But in terms of completing the catch, which is the key
it's
part
all about
here,
hands in the ball.
It's
possession
completing,
and the ball.
And this is what Pereira said, and it's this term, the process. Process doesn't have a defined feet. He said he could have had 2 feet down and his knee down, which he did. It doesn't matter because it's all part of the process. Now, part of the explanation that I thought, and it was interesting because watching it live, I saw it differently than watching in the replay. Now, again, just to be clear, I am very biased on this, and I'm glad they overturned it. But watching the explanation in time with the expanded explanation after the game was over, he said, watching him come down, he's reaching for the goal line, but the reach for the goal line was not separate from him coming down. Like, it was part of his tumbling down, he was reaching for the goal line. which to me is like what he was trying to explain is different than if he comes down, like pivots and dives for the end zone. That would be different because that pivot would separate the dive for the end zone from the catch itself. But because it was all in like one motion, that makes that stretch part of the play. So when the ball hits the ground when he's reaching for the goal line and moves, which there's no question it does, it was all part of that process, which then creates that part of the catch, which means the ground can't move the ball, and you had the incomplete pass.
And people have been texting me, including my father texted me and said I'll keep it clean. That was a bad call. It's not a bad call. It's a bad rule.
Right.
The refs got the call right, but it is a awful rule.
Right.
This is the Calvin Johnson rule.
And that's the key. I'm glad you brought it up. If this is a bad rule that everybody learned about today, you know what, Cowboys fans, you have every right to be angry. And I understand you can be disappointed today. Like I would be. I'd be furious if this is the way my team went out. Like I'd be really mad. But you mentioned it. This exact thing, a touchdown.
4 years ago.
A touchdown. It wasn't like, it was a touchdown. It was
for
taken
what
off
team?
the board. The Detroit Lions, which you have to go on Twitter, and there's great articles that have some of them on there. Like
the Lions
official account said something like, "Don't worry, we've been there," or something like that. Like, it's called, and they did the Calvin Johnson rule. They were referring to 4 years ago, not last week. And it's one of those things where if it had happened and this is the first time everybody heard of it, okay, I understand more of the outrage. Everybody knew, everybody knows the rule. As soon as I saw the replay, I said to my dad, by rule, that's not a catch. I said, by rule, that's not a catch. I said, terrible call, or not terrible, terrible rule, but it's
correct call.
Correct call is that it's incomplete.
Last week, you had people calling bad calls, non-calls, or things like that. What it comes down to is, I don't blame the Lions, the Cowboys, the Packers, and this week I don't blame the refs. But both times it all comes back to the group that I defend all the time, and that is the Shield. This is an NFL issue. Right. This is an NFL problem. Last week it was incompetent refs, but I'm not going to sit here and be like they had money. That's absolutely. Do not give me that crap.
It was a terrible call, and it influenced the outcome of the game last week.
But it happens every week.
It does, and you're right, because it was the Cowboys. Not because they beat the Lions. No one cares about the Lions.
That it was the Lions.
It was because the Cowboys won. It was because the Cowboys won. And if you look at another example, well, that was replacement rights. We won't get into that. But this is a different instance. And again, what comes to my mind is if that rule is a bad rule, which I don't know anyone who thinks that's a good rule.
It's a terrible rule.
Except.
He had the ball in his arm, complete possession when he went to the ground.
Jerry Jones's son is on the competition committee, and he said, now this isn't one of those things like, oh, we should have talked about that. No, he said, we spend hours talking about this every year. Okay.
Why isn't it changed?
Right.
Why is it not changed?
Exactly.
And this is what it goes back to the beginning of this, when I said it's an NFL problem. Last week it was incompetent reffing, which extends to the NFL. Right. This week it was awful rules. Back to the NFL. We've heard it multiple times. The refs are either overworked or underpaid, which a few years ago we had that rectified.
They're all part-time.
It's not their main job.
But
they need to be full-time. They need to simplify the rule book, which comes to today. They get this thing. If
it looks like a catch,
it's ridiculous.
It is a catch.
There's a bad idioms that I'm not going to repeat, but it looks like a catch. It's a catch. There's obviously times where you can see the ground, on a bounce. There's obvious times when it's not a catch. There's no... They almost introduced, a gray area to something that didn't need to have a gray area. Catching is black or white. Today, that was a catch, possibly a touchdown.
And I have to give credit. I've heard this, actually, from our buddy back here, and I think he had heard it maybe from his father-in-law, I think, about instant replay now and the angles we can get and everything. Overcomplicates the game because we now have the ability to dissect everything. You can't possibly, I know some people are like, oh, how, the ref was right there. Well, yeah, but it looked like a catch. And part of, I don't know, he might not have been down on the one because he was bobbled. I didn't know.
Well, that's also, I guess if there was
just to be
no
clear,
contact,
I am super happy.
I know you are. If there was no contact with the ground, wouldn't that have been a touchdown then? Like if he to me, he had the ball, went to the ground, may have been touched. He's down at the 1. But when he went down, the ball touched the grass a little bit.
The ball did, like, it popped the ground. Like, he had it cradled, but it, like, the whole side went down, and it kind of, like, turned it end on end almost.
I guess what I'm saying is, if he didn't have complete possession, I guess they're saying it wasn't incomplete because it touched the ground.
Right, because that was my thought. I was like, well, he didn't gain full possession until he was in the and that's what I said. Well, I was interested because if it, like, hit his chest, if he was bobbling it off his chest, gathers it in the end zone, it's a touchdown.
Because he didn't have possession until he was in the end zone.
Right, you can't be down. That would be like two-hand touch. You get, like, tug. Yeah, I didn't have the ball yet. That kind of thing.
If they remove the gray area, and there was no Calvin Johnson rule with the bobbling and stuff, to me, that's a touchdown because he had possession, was touched going down, wasn't down yet.
Right.
Then he loses the ball like a fumble when he hits the ground.
Well, and then I saw somebody else say,
and then he recovers it in the end zone.
I saw somebody else say, like, does he, and this is legitimate, and you saw it wasn't the case, but did he fumble it and not gain control of it until he's out of bounds in the end zone, ruling it a touchback? There were so many things, and like you said, it shouldn't be that complicated. This should be catch, and the only thing it should have been, was he down at the 1 or was it a touchdown? Like, now,
if there wasn't the Calvin Johnson rule, to me, I would go, he's down at the 1.
Right, I would have said he was down at the 1.
Completely changes.
Right, to me, I say he's down at the 1, which is actually the worst case scenario for the Packers.
Right.
The second to worst case scenario is the touchdown.
Yeah.
Because they're going to score from the 1.
With DeMarco Murray, the way
they're going to score from the 1.
With that offensive line?
Right. But instead of having 3:52 left, or there would have been 3:52 at the end of that, because that's the time they had on when they got the ball back, and I said I wanted to run 4 minutes off the clock, and they did. But it was just one of those things where it's like, oh man, like I can't believe this happened. That being said, Aaron Rodgers in the first half looked really not that good. He could hardly move. Second half, I don't know if they gave him shots at halftime or what, but he wasn't running around like crazy. But they looked a lot better. So we get a rematch in Seattle next week of the Week 1 game. The Packers are going to the 12th man in Seattle, and the winner will play the winner of the AFC game, which will be the Patriots hosting either the Broncos or the Colts.
So there you have it. That's the NFL. As we stand, the divisional round, you have a Seahawks Packers matchup next week, and that'll be for the NFC title. In the AFC, you have New England hosting right now it would be the Colts, who have the ball with about 12 minutes to play. They are up 8, so the Broncos kicked a field goal. It's now 21-13 Indianapolis, so we're going to leave here, check out the end of the game, and we will be back here next week for our normal show on a Sunday the 18th, and next week we'll go over some schedule changes. We'll miss a week here or there. There'll be a Saturday show with just me, or maybe someone will join me. And we'll also have a special announcement. Hopefully by next Sunday we'll have the details ironed out, and we'll have something special, which actually will coincide with our 4th anniversary of the show.
Yeah.
So a lot of interesting and fun stuff going on. But you got any shout-outs or anything to add?
My dad has a birthday this week. So,
yes.
Yep. So happy birthday to him.
Happy birthday to Mr. Raffauf. I believe it's Tuesday.
Yep.
Why do I know that? Because that's the day that I have the ultrasound with Kelly, and we find out if our second child is a boy or a girl. So hopefully, I will be able to tell next week. That's right. Got my girl already this time. Hoping
I was
boy.
saying twins this time.
No, we know it's not
sorry.
twins.
Sorry, I wouldn't wish that on anyone.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's it. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. I guess I do want to announce we've only had one show since really the break, and we had one the day that this happened, but it was in the afternoon. I think we'll say congratulations to our basketball analyst, Adam Filer, on the birth of his son, which was the night of December 22nd. We had a show earlier that day. That night, his wife gave birth
got the text like, oh my God.
To his son. So congratulations to him, and we're glad that he's doing better and is prepared to come home. Hopefully this week.
Hopefully coming up sometime soon. So hopefully they continue to get some progress there.
All right. So tune in next week for episode 161. We'll be covering the NFL Conference Championships games. Should be a good one.
We hope you tune in every Sunday evening at 6:30 for our Take on Sports. Until next time, I'm J-Raff.
And I'm Joe Mays. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. Don't forget, you can download each episode of the show from the podcast section of the iTunes Store. We'll see you next time, and thanks again for listening.